What's up, everybody? Welcome to Move the Sticks. DJ, Bucky, Rhett. I feel like we were all just together because we were.
We were
last night watching the Super Bowl. I'm gonna go ahead, Buck.
I felt bad because I was walking out the building. I just see Red at the desk, just kind of hanging out. Like Red, when they finally
just sitting there, just sitting there. You know,
Insurance.
I was doing my best Chris Rose impression for the re-air of our NFL Game Day Final, which is done live from New Orleans. So those guys shut the Superdome down, and when that gets shut down, then I pop up and you hear my voice every now and then on the re-air of NFL Game Day Final. So I think I get a credit for that when it wins an Emmy. So
yeah, rightfully so. Rightfully so. By the way, it's time for the lead block presented by T-Mobile for Business. Football needs a network willing to go the extra yard. So do you. Go further with T-Mobile for Business. Guys, I'm going open floor here. We got a chance to watch the game together, discuss the game. But Buck, yeah. I'm curious. Now we've had a night to kind of sleep on it and digest it. What stands out to you the most?
The thing that stands out is just talent over everything. Just as we're debating the two teams leading up to the thing, I think the back-to-back champion thing, the three-peat thing, the 16 or 17 one-score games in a row thing made everyone scared to go against the Kansas City Chiefs. But when you really looked at this, and if you did a tell of the tape, it was decidedly in the Eagles' favor. And last night we were talking, I said it kind of reminded me of when Mike Tyson got knocked out by Buster Douglas. He was fumbling around for his mouthpiece. And I'm going to go even farther with that analogy. It reminded me of Mike Tyson taking on Evander Holyfield when he bit his ear. Yeah. I felt like we saw the Kansas City Chiefs act out of character because very early in the game, they were overwhelmed by the talent disparity between their team and the Eagles. And I think it played into the way that they played. We've never seen the Kansas City Chiefs look like that.
Well, once we have. And the Super Bowl against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah. And that's what this felt like. This felt like a team that did not have answers for a more talented defensive front. I mean, I think in the second half, we saw them try to kind of chip a little bit more. And a couple of times actually ended up working against them. You chip the edge into the center. Mahomes steps up and bang in the interior. I mean, it was like anything that they tried, that's what it also felt like too. It was like, like trying to run up, run up a hill that's got water pouring down it. It was just kind of fighting against it everywhere. Everything they did. Even though like we talked about it at our halftime show, like DeAndre Hopkins, like it's a shot to put him in field goal range to get some kind of positivity before the end of the half. And guy with the most sure hands, maybe in the league over the course of his career, loses it, just drops it. And, that adds to kind of the building frustration that they go into the half with. But I think ultimately, DJ, what this comes down to, and then for the purposes of what we do here, just extreme roster construction in terms of developing and committing to the defensive front. And that's really what showed up in a large way. I mean, you go down through the line. I mean, you got 3 first-round picks, which, is pretty dang good, right? Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. The later 2, obviously the ones that really showed up.
Brandon Graham Williams, as well.
Brandon Graham, right? Of course. Yep. Another one, sure, as part of the rotation. And then Milton Williams, Moro Ajamo. You've got Jalix Hunt, who was, like a firecracker coming off the edge, and this one is a rookie. You throw in Josh Sweat in there as a 4th-round pick, and it's just over the course of the last 5 years, they've just been pounding that dedication to upgrading and continuing to fortify that front. And I think that's one of my favorite things when we get to the draft is when you see teams – go in there and continue to try to upgrade a position that is already a perceived strength, right? Because that's what allows you to have this kind of depth and talent when you get into big games like this.
Oh, I want to get to that point because Jack, our buddy, Jack Andrade, who does great research, he had posted this. So think about the 24 Eagles. They lost a Hall of Fame center in Kelsey, 6-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle in Fletcher Cox, their sack leader in 22 and 23 and Hassan Reddick. And he didn't write this, but they even missed on Bryce Huff, who they paid. Yeah. And they still had an abundance of riches of all the guys that you just mentioned there. So it's never a problem solved. Let's move on to something else. It is they are watering that plant
Yeah.
every single year, Buck. It is pass rush, it is offensive line, and they might have some other needs. Maybe we need some bushes over, but you know what? We're gonna water these ones every single year.
Yeah, and it's not only that, like they're aggressive in everything that they do because as much as we've talked about the last day and a half about their offensive and defensive lines, they've also made bold moves when it came to upgrading the playmakers that they wanted. You saw the trade that they made to acquire AJ Brown. They doubled down by making sure they had an elite receiver that they drafted early in the draft in Devontae Smith. You think about now and Quinyon Mitchell, first round cornerback. They double up in the second round
It
with Cooper
feels like they've
DeJean.
got first and
I
second round
mean,
players at every position.
Yes, that
everywhere.
is
I mean,
exactly what it feels like.
they realized what they lost when Chauncey Gardner Johnson departed. So what they do, they bring him back and pay him. This is a team that I would say for all of the stuff we talk about, their bold moves or whatever it is, they quickly acknowledge their mistakes and they quickly work to repair them.
Let's talk for a moment though about risk tolerance too, because that's a part of this equation as well, right? You don't get Jalen Carter where they got Jalen Carter, if you aren't taking into account the entirety of the player profile, which, as everyone knows,
Mhm.
had some significant things happen off the field with the car situation.
Yeah.
But they're able to get comfortable enough with it and with the player, and they bring in a support structure to help the player. I mean, like, it wasn't the same type of risk with Nolan Smith, but obviously enough for a talented player like that to slip to him at the back end of the first round. There was some risk there. I mean, ended up taking Kobe Dean in the third round. I would argue at that point it's not a risk. He's a really good player. They ended up getting in the third round because other teams weren't willing to. I think that part of it too is kind of intriguing to see play out on this stage, DJ.
Well, let's take those individually, okay?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Jalen Carter had off the field issues. If you watch Jalen Carter's tape, he played with passion, energy, fire, like, and you talk to people and do your background on him. Yes, needs to grow up. There's some
Yeah.
immaturity stuff. This guy loves football. Like he is
Mhm.
on the football field. You'll see him. I remember a play, I think it was against Kentucky, where he's chasing a play, 30, 40 yards downfield. So hey, he has some off the field issues, but he loves football.
Yeah.
Nolan Smith didn't have production. Everybody was
Right.
panicked, didn't have sack production. Well, if you look at that situation, start first of all, he loves football. This guy plays with energy and passion. He's in a rotation with the best defense in football where they blow everybody out. So you're in a rotation. You're only going to play half the game anyways, and you're sharing snaps. Your production is not going to be there. You can look at the whole picture here and see. Nakobe Dean, well, he's undersized. He's undersized. Well, guess what? He loves football. Again, passionate leader. And it ended up being, look, the size issue got him this year. Maybe you could say that contributed. Maybe it didn't to his injury. But when he was playing lights out. They have collected all these guys, Buck,
Mhm.
that they are football character. Like we talk about all the time.
Yeah.
There's personal character and there's football character. Football character wise on the field, those guys, I remember having this discussion. I won't mention the player, but as a player is going to go on to be a Hall of Famer. And that was somebody had told me, a coach of his had said, look, he's made mistakes. I don't doubt it for a second. But the threat of having football taken away from him,
Whew.
he won't be able to live without football. He loves football so much that I think that will correct some of the behavioral stuff that he's struggled with.
Yeah, no, it's funny because a lot of us always talk about like, hey man, you want guys that love it, that obsess over it. They're committed, not just interested in the sport. And when you talk about all of those guys, and I've heard Sirianni talk about it, I've heard other coaches talk about it, like to play for us, they have to love ball because what we're going to ask them to do, you have to love it, or you won't fully
Mhm.
embrace all of the things that they're going to ask you to do. I told DJ Red this. You may have been out of the room. I talked
Yeah.
about watching the Eagles in pregame. And I remember I was working with the Jags, and I remember commenting to one of my colleagues, like, look at the difference. Like, look, they're having a practice in pregame with the developmental, the
That's
practice
right.
squad, and the young guys. And they are going, when I mean they're coming off the field fully lathered up, I was like, wow, on a Sunday. And so what it told me is there are no burger eaters on that team, meaning guys that get on the trip and just eat all the snacks and they're hanging out on the sideline.
They do that too,
Every
but they're gonna work.
yeah, everybody has to work. And I think Nick Sirianni, for all of the things that people have kind of taken him to task for in terms of his personality and all those things, I believe his pedigree is all over this Eagles team, meaning Mount Union, three-time national champion, played under a great coach who has a winning tradition. You think about all the things that he learned along the way. All of that comes out. Rick Pitino talked about how he met Nick Sirianni in Indianapolis because Nick wanted to know about how to build a culture, a winning environment, how he's always asking those questions. I think the way that you see this team play, it is apparent that they have high standards and they get guys who really relish those standards and expectations.
Mm. I think that's really interesting. The other part of this is, we talk about the players, but I think we also need to look at the power of position coaches in this
Mhm,
equation too with the Philadelphia Eagles. You talk about bringing a group together, and you might be talking about two of the best in the league. Talking about Clint Hurt, who came over in 23 to run the defensive line, senior defensive assistant, and then obviously Stoutland University with Coach Jeff Stoutland has resurrected Mekhi Becton's career, has developed Jordan Mailata into a premier left tackle. You're talking about those interior guys being a cohesive unit as well with Dickerson and Cam Jurgens stepping in for a legend in Jason Kelsey and winning a flipping Super Bowl in the first year without him. Like, I think those two in particular, and I'm not to say that the other guys, don't meet
mhm,
that standard because they certainly do.
mhm.
But man, I mean, what those guys have done with those units in particular. Now, look, they've been given great talent, right? But you got to develop it and you got to mold it and you got to shape it. I think that's important to know.
I want DJ to bring this up because we talked about it last night. He talked about how they are willing to draft guys that are on the come. They're not quite fully realized as prospects, but they understand it may take a year or two for them to do it. And that, I believe, is combined with what they have as a coaching staff. We always talk about coaches now in today's game. So, oh man, guys aren't developed. You got to have a finished product. The Philadelphia Eagles are not afraid of coaching unrefined prospects. They have a plan in place that if there may be a year or two out, they're okay with that. All the guys that you mentioned on the offensive line, those guys weren't ready to play when they got there, but they were afforded the luxury of sitting a year or two behind a really good offensive line. To me, it's everything that works together. It's the front office, the coaching staff, and the players. They all are in lockstep in terms of they know exactly what they want to get, what fits their environment, and then their coaches and front office understand how to maintain that environment.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I'll give a shout out to my guy in Jeremiah Washburn
Of
who's
course.
coaching.
Yeah.
He's coaching the outside linebackers and pass rushers. And think about, we came into the league together as scouts. His dad's a
Mhm,
legendary defensive line
Yeah.
coach, but Wash came in as a scout. So he has a perspective to look at somebody like Jalix Hunt or to look at somebody like Nolan Smith and see, okay, there's work to be. The tools here from a scouting standpoint are so rich, and then it's up to me to develop them and coach them and refine them. But like, give me those guys all day long. Whereas I think sometimes traditional coaches, we always joke, Buck, they want, hey, give it to me in clear packaging, already assembled, no assembly
Yes.
required. I just want to coach scheme. I want to be able to tell them we're running this stunt. And when we like, here's key, like, no. We got to work on fundamentals, man. We got to stay after practice and we got to grind through how you're getting out of your stance. Like we've got to work on those things. And I think I was thinking of Aaron Glenn. Aaron
mhm,
Glenn getting the head coaching job with the Jets. Aaron Glenn started off as a scout. Do you think that's
mhm.
helped him with some of the pieces they've added in
No
the
question.
secondary in Detroit over the last few years? Because he can sign off on it and say, I know what that's supposed to look like. Now it's up to me to get it out of him.
Yeah.
Th-
Yeah.
th-
And
Look,
yeah. Go ahead.
I think that relationship is important in terms of the scouting and the coaching, making sure they marry up. So often we act like both of those operations work in silos when they really should be working together. When it comes to player acquisition and player development, they need to be on the same page.
Yeah, and I mean, boy, Wash's guys were rolling
Oh my
in this one.
gosh.
I
Yeah.
mean, to see again, to think about, it's not just that the blue chip talent. I mean, even though you could argue it was there with guys like Josh Sweat and Jalix Hunt, but the fact that they come, on
Sweat
day
didn't
2 and
come
day
in like
3,
that though. I
yeah,
mean,
that's what I'm
Wash has
saying.
been there
Like,
for that whole ride.
that is a credit to their development, their commitment to it, and their passion for it. And I think that's a great point you make about a scouting background, for a coach and understanding what to look for and then how you can mold those raw skills, right? And then make it into a big time player. So credit
And I think
that's off
also
to them.
Buck is if you look at what's and how he's I mean, how look, he's the best executive in the NFL. I don't know how anybody can argue against it just with
No,
what
not
he's
now.
done.
Yeah.
But I look at when you had Howie and the Andy Reid influence of what Andy believed in core philosophy wise, and then you incorporate really kind of I'll call it the Ravens model that came in when Joe
Mhm.
D and Andy Weidel came in there, and then they kind of mix this whole thing together. Wash is there, who has experience in all these different areas.
Mhm.
They've kind of taken, like, there used to be kind of, oh, you could be kind of an analytics team, or you're like an old school scouting team.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
they have mixed it all together, and Howie has put it all together where it's the envy of the league, man. They got somebody, as somebody texted me, they got Saquon Barkley for Gabe Davis prices. Like, think about that for a second.
I mean, not only like that is great, and I want to go back to what you were talking about in terms of the best of both worlds, right? And I can tell you, as someone who didn't grow up scouting in the Baltimore Ravens system, it was always the envy of the league when we talked about it because it seemed like they never missed on top picks. And then you talk about the Eagles and the analytics and how they were able to mix that in. The other thing that I'm going to talk about, and Red alluded to it when he talked about the coaching, making Sirianni be the CEO type coach, making him concentrate on being the head coach as opposed to the head coach plus play caller and those things. I believe there are merits to that. And I believe that Sirianni deserves a lot of credit, one, for improving as a coach, but two, the foresight that the upper management had in saying, hey, we need you to learn how to run the entire operation. Your job is to manage the team. DJ, you talked to me about what they say fundamental days, where they
Yeah.
spend days like things that show up on tape. They fix the problems. We heard in post game, Brandon Graham talked about we didn't have any victory Mondays, and so to me, I can tell you, having been around a team that had a lot of Mondays off, when you work on Monday to correct the things that showed up on Sunday, it allows you to jump on Wednesday, which is the first practice day of the week, with clarity in terms of what we need to do and how we need to get better. This is a team that is not only a development team when it comes to the long range, they are an improvement team that each week they try to take steps to get better. And we saw it culminate in a championship.
I want to get back to you on that, talking about those fundamental days. One of the things that we've talked about previously is non-negotiables, right? We did a whole episode on this in the
Mhm.
past about, hey, these are things every team should have. That you should have
Yeah.
a scouting philosophy that says we can take them in different shapes and sizes, but we will not compromise on this. And you can go position by position. We talk about,
Mhm.
Bill Belichick in that
Yeah.
presentation. He will not play with a dumb safety. I don't care if you're the
Yes.
most athletically gifted guy in the world. If you are not smart,
Better
you
have a
cannot
CPU
play
up there.
safety for him. Not happening.
Mhm.
And what one of the tenets that we've talked about over the last few years, and it's something to keep in mind as we go into this draft. And I'll give the Chiefs credit on this as well. Do you want to know the most underrated thing in scouting right now is tackling? Look at the
Oh,
tackling. Look at
yes.
the tackling on the perimeter, and look at Cooper DeJean and his batting average out there in space against those athletes. And then flip it around. Look at some of the, like Nick Bolton, and some of the tackles in
Oh,
space
yeah.
that the Chiefs
Really
had.
good.
It was great. And
Yeah.
and that's why I'm sitting here going, oh, I get paid to cover him. Not anymore, man. Not in this league. If you can't tackle with the way the pass game is horizontally in this league right now, all this, the shell coverage, you better get some corners that can freaking tackle, man.
It's funny that you brought that up. When I was at the East West Shrine game, I didn't get a chance to talk to PJ Fleck from Minnesota directly, but I was listening to a podcast where he was talking about the things that they've done to punch above their weight at the University of Minnesota. And the things that they talk about, turnovers one,
Mm.
missed tackling was two, because missed tackling leads to explosive plays. And when we looked at those two teams play, particularly the Eagles, who decided we're not going to blitz, we're going to play an umbrella coverage, which required you to tackle in space, man, it is underrated the value in having guys on the perimeter that can get players down in one-on-one situations. You never saw the Kansas City Chiefs really have those big explosive plays that they can have with their speed athletes and Xavier Worthy and Marquise Hollywood Brown on the horizontal things. And that is a testament to their ability to tackle well in
Yeah.
space.
Well, look at some of the players, from some universities, that have top flight defenses that send guys to the league. I mean, you look at what Tom Allen has done in his career at Penn State, going now to
Yep.
Clemson. It's takeaways, tackling, and effort. Takeaways, tackling, and effort. Kane Womack at Alabama, same way. Takeaways, tackling, and effort. Takeaways, tackling. So like that, I mean, and then you find guys that fit those bills, and obviously as scouts, like you can see that I'm sure you guys can attest when you go to schools, like you can see the schools that make the emphasis on that type of fundamental as it comes to. And look, I know it's a lot different now, as we're, we tackle far less, we talk about it far less, in the landscape
But
of practice.
for the corner position, I would argue that, well, Bucky's been in the league longer than I was, but I got in 03, and we did literally we had conversations. Well, he's a cover corner, like he doesn't really tackle. We were paying him to cover. He's a cover corner, and now, and my opinion on it is that just we've seen so many condensed formations, and offensive coaches have gotten so smart, and that they are going to make you the force player, and you can't hide anymore out there on the perimeter.
It has always been a part of the game. It has always been a thing. Like, I can tell you, going back to when I was in Jacksonville and we played against the Titans or the Oilers, whatever they were called at the time, with Eddie George, they would deliberately crack the safeties and make the cornerback have to tackle Eddie George over and over and over again. Tackling has always been a part of it. And I'm going to say this because people and some coaches like to use the lack of practice time or not putting pads on as an excuse for not having a good tackling team. That's not it, man. The fundamentals can be taught without having the pads on. You have to be committed to doing time on task to being a really good tackling team. And it also not only has to be who you bring in, they need to be good tacklers, but it has to be a point of emphasis.
Yeah.
You can't cut out 3 to 5 minutes of tackling to get some more scheme stuff. I love what Red was saying. Takeaways, tackling, and effort. To me, that's really what it's about. And we're seeing that the great teams, they all emphasize those things.
Yep, no doubt. That's a wrap, actually, for the lead block presented by T-Mobile for Business. Football needs a network willing to go the extra yard. So do you. Go further with T-Mobile for Business. All right, guys, let's jump over to the other side here, the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll give you my quick analogy, and we'll get into all the things there and where they go. And this, sky's not falling. Kansas City. You've got Patrick Mahomes. You've got Andy Reid. You got a great defense. We'll get to all that stuff. But my image that I had was, if the Super Bowl was on the 30th floor of a building, the Chiefs have to use the stairs, man. Like, they don't have an elevator anymore. Like it's hard. Like, and that's what's incredible what they've done. And they've won all these games this year, all these one possession games, all these close games, all these late comebacks. But it felt like everything was so hard. And eventually that wasn't going to work, and I thought in this game that was just kind of exposed in this one. Every single wart that they had, which they'd been able to overcome and cover up, got exposed.
Yeah, look, and I think the thing that we're going to talk about now is how do they rebuild the offensive line, because that is exactly what got exposed in their last Super Bowl loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the COVID year, and then that's kind of where we felt like this was going now. And they're going to have to spend a lot of resources. And
was that the trade for? I got to go back and look that up now. Did they trade for Orlando Brown right after that Super Bowl?
Yep, that was the first remake. The first iteration of the remake, right? Was after that. And then I can't remember. Tooney was already there, right?
Yeah, he's been there.
He was the free agency signing, but it was the tackles that they really redid, and that's when they went out and got, was it Juwan Taylor right after that too? It felt like that was not long after, right there. And, they spent all that money to go get those guys and those resources. And then, fortified the interior right after that, right? With Creed Humphrey and then and Trey Brown. So they've got to go that route again with the tackles.
Trey Smith, right?
Yeah. What did I say? Trey Brown? Trey Smith. Yeah, you're right. I think that's the one thing. And then the other part of it is like this, kind of slow deceleration from where they were when they won a Super Bowl before this last run, right? And which was a complete, I don't want to say complete, but it was a total slowing down from the way that they attacked defenses in the past, right? Tyreek Hill's gone. We're going to find a different way to operate. And they had done that very well. But when you can't protect, and when you can't, allow your quarterback to make some of those quicker, some of those throws, and allow your receivers to make plays with the ball in their hands, like you're not going to have a successful outing at the highest level against top tier talent. And they just didn't have, the war daddies to borrow your expression, to fight this way, to fight that battle this way. I'll be curious to see how they reinvent themselves with this one.
Well, look, man, I think the reinvention that they were able to do, and I'll say this, 5 Super Bowls in 6 years is ridiculous. The only thing that I can say comes close to that or is in the same realm as the Buffalo Bills going 4 straight. I came to the Bills on the heels of that, but just the resilience, the competitive stamina, the focus that you have to go back to back to back like the Chiefs have gone, and to think about 5 times in 6 years, it's remarkable. Even though they have a 3-2 record in that run, it's one of the great runs that we've seen in the National
Yeah.
Football League. To me, this kind of feels like that pause that the New England Patriots had after they won 3 and 4 years, where you have to take a reset, and it may take them a while to kind of get back. Patrick Mahomes would give them a chance, but I think what we saw, they kind of have to bottom out a little bit and build it back up. They've been able to kind of patchwork the offense for a little bit, the offensive line and the playmakers. They got to commit to building this offense up the right way for them to legitimately have a chance to deal with some of the talented teams that they're going to face over the next few years. This is a chance for Beach and Andy Reid to really reset, refocus, and do it. And I'm actually glad that they got knocked out and they didn't lose it on cards, because I believe this gives them a chance to really see where the flaws and the weaknesses are in their team.
Yeah, I mean, the defense is still in great shape. I mean,
Yeah, I thought they played all right. They played
played
fine.
fine. They
Yeah.
stopped the run. They did what they had to do. They let the ball go over their head a couple times, but that was the risk. That was the way they had to play that game against that Eagles offense. So defensively, they've got some free agents, but they're still in a good spot there. I would say the hardest thing is tackles are hard to find, man. When you're picking 30,
Mhm.
31, or 32 every year, there's not many of them, and they're premium positions, and they go. So at some point in time, and I don't know that this is the right one, but at some point in time, they're going to have to probably be aggressive and try and go get one, like trade up and go get a tackle. Think about the Eagles. They've had the luxury of having Lane Johnson as a Hall of Famer, and you just plug it. You draft one of those guys in the top 5 and you hit, you set it and forget it. Like, he's
Yeah.
set like that. You don't have to worry about that. And then they struck gold with Mailata in a late round on a rugby player, and ended up hitting on that. But it's so hard to do. That's why
Yeah.
I look at it, doing the Charger games of, gosh, you think, man, the Chargers got a long way to go to figure out how to close the gap. I'm like, you know what? They've got the 2 tackles, like 2 young tackles that you can just
Mhm.
set it and forget it. Like, they're hard to find, man. They're really, really hard to find. That's going to be the biggest challenge for the Chiefs to me. And Brett Veach is really, really good.
Oh, yeah.
And he's gonna have to figure out a way to go address that. They can't run through the tournament. In my opinion, it's going to be hard to continually run through that tournament playing the way they've had to play. And in hindsight, I know it, and they said Joe Tooney was their most valuable player for kicking out to left tackle. But last night was the first time that I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? It did weaken 2 positions. Like,
Mhm.
if he's
Yes.
at guard, he's really good at guard, and now we can send all our help. And
To
like,
that
it
side.
felt like in this one, Buck, there was these holes in the boat, and they'd plug one, and then there was water coming out of another one.
Yeah.
There is something to be said for that. Like, in moving someone out, you basically weaken 2 positions, because Tooney's not a natural left tackle, and you've given up what he was as an all-pro guard. It's something they have to consider, but they have to fix that. I mean, we've said it. I mean, for 2 years, they've had issues on the edges. I mean, it's been a
Yeah.
huge issues. They tried to throw money at it with Jawan Taylor. He certainly, in my mind, has been a disappointment in terms of what they thought that he would be on the perimeter. They have to fix that, because look, if number 15 is uncomfortable, they don't have a chance. They have to make sure that he is always comfortable, because if he's comfortable, he can get it done by himself.
Well, I mean, you think about it, outside of the 21 draft, right, which is when they nailed it on Creed Humphrey in the 2nd and Trey Smith in the 6th, there's not another guy that rotates in there that they've hit from the draft on the offensive line
Mhm.
yet,
Since 21, right?
since 21 or before.
Yeah.
Or before. I mean, like, we were talking about all the guys that have been on that line for the Eagles, even prior to that. But I mean, like, Wanye Morris, 3rd round pick in 23, Kingsley Suamataia, 2nd round pick this year, rookie, hadn't worked out. I don't know if they're ready to close the book on that yet, but there's some time there perhaps. But then, the other guys are, kind of depth players. It was, Norzad, Hansen, like, it
Yeah.
hasn't hit that way for them outside of those 2 guys who are really dang good. Like, let's
Mhm.
not take away from that. But there's just not that. There's not that that kind of cupboard full of guys.
Yeah, and look, we have to mention it. I know he's no doubt first ballot Hall of Famer, going to go down as arguably the best player to ever play the position, at least in the conversation. But Kelsey doesn't have the juice he had, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So
Right.
they need to get some more dynamic players to add to their skill position group. That's got to go along with it. And I would also add, I mean, they had 0 run game, none. And
Didn't even
they
try it.
don't have a big time back. I mean,
Well, that was the thing. They don't have anyone that when we stand up in the defensive meeting and we talk about, hey guys, this week we got the Kansas City Chiefs. Who's the running back that we fear that we have to stop? Look, they tried it a few years ago, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but it didn't work out for them. They need a big time back that will offset some of the pressure and attention that you
Yeah.
put on Patrick Mahomes. We've seen it, and it's one of the things that I think will be the theme of the offseason. We can talk about the renaissance of the running backs, but I would say it's not necessarily just the renaissance of the back. It's teams that had established quarterbacks paired them with an established back, and it opened up the offense. Look at the Eagles, look at the Ravens, even look at the Packers. When you have a marquee back playing with a marquee quarterback, it makes it nearly impossible for a defense to really come up with the answers to defend you.
And the last thing I'll say on the Chiefs and where they're at from a roster standpoint is we also got to take into consideration Rashee Rice was out for pretty much
that's
this
a huge.
season.
That's a great point. That's a huge
And look,
deal.
you could make
Yeah.
an argument as to whether he's not a wide receiver one on every team in the league, but he was on this team.
Yes.
And that's tough to overcome when you don't just have again another guy like that you could throw in there. Obviously they traded for DeAndre Hopkins, tried it just
No.
never quite got there.
Yeah.
With Hop.
Nope. I think that's a great point. I mean, think about if they could somehow go find a tackle in free agency. I don't know. You get Ronnie Stanley on the back nine. Maybe he comes in there. I don't know. There's ways you could try and address that. And then if you get an explosive back, which this draft has plenty of, you can find your future tight end in this draft as well. It can look different. There's not a lot that needs to be done defensively. I mean, they have a lot of talented young players. You got to pay some of them, but they're in great shape on that side of the ball. All right, guys, it's time for Hot or Not, brought to you by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage. Buck, there's only one coordinator in this game that's going to leave, and that's Kellen Moore. It looks like he's going to be the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, and coming off of a hot performance, to say the least, with the last 2 games, the NFC Championship game and then the Super Bowl.
Look, man, I'm gonna say this. I am really impressed by the growth that Kellen Moore displayed as a coach. We always talk about players getting developed, and this is the developmental league for players, but it's also a developmental league for coaches. You had a chance to see Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator for the Chargers. We all watched him as the coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. And I would say that Kellen Moore's growth as a run game caller, in terms of calling the run game, being creative with the run game, and those things, man, it's going to help him so much going forward as a head coach, or maybe head coach, play caller, and those things. What he was able to do with the Eagles is, I couldn't even imagine how he's going to be able to do it, because I'm like, man, he's going to bring the same playbook that he's had at other places. They're going to try and throw it. It's not going to match the personnel. And early in the year, he put all the creativity in the run game as opposed to the passing game. And this offense, even though the Super Bowl numbers don't reflect it, their creative running game keeps defensive coordinators up at night. And then it allows them to be a little more simplistic with the passing game, yet still explosive in both areas.
Oof, yeah, that's smart. And I think the evolution for Kellen, you think about this 3 teams in 3 years, right? With Dallas to the Chargers and then now to the Eagles. And man, I think a lot of times,
4. Soon to be 4 teams.
that's a great point. Soon to be 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when you start seeing that kind of movement, you wonder, like, all right, is the luster coming off a once very shiny object in terms of the coaching community? But man, he has really found himself in Philly. And yeah, I mean, having a generational talent in Saquon Barkley certainly helps, and a really good offensive line and the tools to work with that way. But I think now it's so valuable for him to really see it and to explain that, in detail, that formula, to Jeff Ireland and a Mickey Loomis, and like, guys, I know I can win if we find ways to simulate that type of construction. And the Saints have done it in the past. I mean, arguably had one of the greatest drafts in history in the Alvin Kamara draft, Ryan Ramczyk, Marshawn Lattimore, that whole thing. Like I'm not saying they can do that again, but they can find ways to reemphasize what's important, especially to a Kellen Moore led offense and team. and we'll see where they go with it.
Jeff Ireland's really good, man.
Yeah.
He is a good evaluator. And I think if you give him the instructions, Buck, like that's to me is a great personnel guy. When you say, hey, this is what we're looking for, he can go find it.
Yeah, no, I think it would be interesting. DJ, I'm pretty sure this was in his background. Kellen Moore's dad was a great high school coach, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Like,
And his
great
brother
high
is a coordinator at Missouri.
Yeah, so like he understands what this is. This is not something that I would say is going to be challenging or daunting in terms of doing it. What I want to see, and this is what I believe the Saints haven't done. I wonder what their identity was. I felt like it was very clear and apparent for years under Sean Payton what the New Orleans Saints were about. On offense, despite all the stuff with Drew Brees, they're still going to run the football. When they were their best, they were going to run the football with multiple backs. They're going to do it on defense. They're going to be very aggressive. I'm looking forward to seeing the Saints kind of get back to that. Because when I think about the Saints, the first thing I think about is dome patrol and then whatever they've been on offense with Drew Brees or whatever. If he can marry those two things where they have dome patrol on defense and that fun offense, sign me up. Because then I'll be ready to go. Who that?
Don't you disparage the dome patrol by suggesting that there could be another. There will never be another Pat Swilling, Ricky Jackson, Vaughn Johnson, and Sam Mills. Let me make that perfectly clear.
I just remember seeing the picture that would hang, the banner that would hang in the back corner of the thing.
It's incredible.
Just a little bit of that. There's so much history and energy in that building. When
they've got to have a dominant look. The offense is fun. The screens and the shots that they were doing with Sean Payton was incredible. Robert Meacham and Devery Henderson running 60 yards downfield, virtually uncovered. Like that stuff was awesome. But man, that dome rocks when that defense is rolling. And I think that this is an aging defense now. Look, Cam Jordan has been one of the best players in the league. Demario Davis has been one of the best players in the league.
Old defense.
Can they help you usher in the new era? Or do you really have to tear it down? I think it's probably the former. I think they probably help usher it in.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, we'll wait and let that announcement become official. But a nice finish, if it is a finish, for Kellen Moore there in Philadelphia. That was this week's Hot or Not segment, brought to you by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage. Store more and do more with your data. Try them for free at wasabi.com. Closing statements here, Buck. Anything else you want to add before we get out of here on that Super Bowl?
Football is great. Like, no matter what we say about it, no matter how the results end up, football is so great. Like, to think about how the season started and then we watch it finish up with the Eagles winning the Super Bowl in dominant fashion, all of the twists and turns throughout the season, to watch it end up like that is one of the reasons why, look, man, I am a football junkie. Sign me up for it anytime. But now we get to close that chapter and we get to kind of cast our eyes towards the draft and the combine, the draft, and all of that, as everyone has completely hit the reset button saying, hey, that was 2024. We're ready to go to 2025. We can win it. I'm excited about this part of the process.
Bucky, that was beautiful. There ain't no time for nostalgia. I'll be in Indianapolis 2 weeks from today, man. The combine is coming down the pipe, and there ain't no getting around it, man. Draft season is here, and it does not wait.
Yeah, I hope it's hope season.
Yeah.
And if you want to have hope, just look at what the team that's hoisting the trophy did over this period of time 1 year ago. That was it. They built a Super Bowl finishing piece in this free agency and in the draft, and they went and won the whole thing. And that's what's so great about football versus some of these other sports. Every single city, no matter where you are, no matter what you need, you have hope that you can go find it this offseason. And we're going to be the place to discuss all of it as we head towards free agency and the draft. So we appreciate you hanging with us. We'll see you next time right here on Move the Sticks.